This is Newsroom on SABC News. Good morning. Welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name is Eben Jansen. This show is broadcast live every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Highlights are repeated at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 o'clock the following morning. We're also streaming live on YouTube between 9 and 10 a.m. every day. The entire show you can also watch on our YouTube channel at your leisure, anytime, anywhere in the world. It will be another tough day on the stand for Oscar Pistorius, with cross-examination set to start in the Notrth Gauteng High Court a little bit later today. Is it a surprise that Nigeria is now Africa's largest economy? That's a question we answer after the break. And then Prasa cracks down on train surfing in South Africa. If you don't know what that is, stay tuned. I'll get you in the picture a little bit later. But first, here are the news headlines. Seven houses belonging to police officers have been torched in Bloemhof in the northwest. The incident occurred during a confrontation between the officers and the protesters after a meeting at the local stadium. SABC vehicles were also attacked and one was gutted. Locals want the municipality disbanded over a lack of service delivery. Angry residents also disrupted a meeting addressed by ANC leaders. They pelted them with stones and had to be rescued by police. The Bloemhof residents also said alight 4 trucks passing on the nearby N12. Alleged murder mastermind Shrindavani has spent his first night at the Valkenburg Psychiatric Hospital in Pinelands on the Cape Peninsula. He will spend the next month at the hospital undergoing treatment. Yesterday, he made a brief appearance in the Western Cape High Court for the murder of his wife while on honeymoon in November 2010. Davani was formally charged with kidnapping, robbery with aggravating circumstances, murder, and obstructing the course of justice. He's been remanded in custody, with the case being postponed to the 12th of May. No bail application was made. Oscar Pistorius will once again be on the stand as he continues to give evidence. He has been giving an account of the morning he shot and killed his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp. Last year, he alleges to have mistaken her for an intruder. Court proceedings adjourned early for the second time yesterday, as Pistorius once again broke down in tears. Today, he will still be led in delivering his evidence-in-chief by his lawyer, Barry Roo. State Prosecutor Gerinal will then begin with his cross-examination. Murder-accused Oscar Pistorius could be in for tough cross-examination by State Prosecutor Gerinal if the athlete completes his evidence-in-chief today. He's been testifying about events Valentine's Day last year at his Pretoria East home. The Notrth Gauteng High Court in Pretoria had to adjourn early again yesterday when Pistorius broke down after the lunch break. He's pleaded not guilty to 4 charges, including the murder of his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp. Pistorius is the second defence witness to take to the stand. Joining us from Pretoria live is Griselda Lewis. Good morning, Griselda.
Well, a very good morning to you, Eben.
Cross-examination, they say, could start today, Griselda, and that one would think is expected to be quite brutal.
We're expecting Oscar Pistorius this morning. He's not yet arrived. We're just looking here towards our left. He usually arrives at about this time, but we're expecting Oscar Pistorius again to take the stand and also give further details about what happened. You would recall yesterday he had adjourned and sobbed uncontrollably when he described how he found Reva Steenkamp's body lying on the bathroom floor. When he says he sat over her, Oscar Pistorius couldn't contain his emotions, so we're expecting him to move on from that point this morning into what happened. We're also expecting, once that is done, once he's finished giving his side of the story for cross-examination, to begin a speculation is that might be at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. Well, of course, depending on when Oscar Pistorius finishes giving his side of the story.
He relived some of the events yesterday of that night. What was the reaction, mainstream reaction to his story that he told yesterday?
Well, even I think what everybody was looking out for was whether Oscar Pistorius would stick to the version of events that he gave in the affidavit. If Oscar Pistorius will tell the story as he jotted it down, then, if I may. So Oscar Pistorius yesterday really very emotional when he began describing the events of February the 13th when he arrived home and found Reeva Steenkamp preparing dinner. They had dinner together, says they sat at the table and had a conversation like every loving couple, and basically they retired to bed. He'd woken up at some point and went to bring out the fans that were on the balcony. He heard sounds and went on to describe when he actually went into combat mode. I recall him also describing a situation where he said, "My lady, that is when everything changed," basically describing at what point he went into combat mode when he says he realized that there might be somebody in the house, somebody trying to break in to his Silverwoods estate home.
The Steenkamp family, especially Mother June, remained stony-faced throughout, but dropped her head several times while listening to his testimony yesterday. Has there been any further reaction from the Steenkamp family after what he or his version that he started to put together on the stand yesterday?
Well, Eben, we've been having a discussion here outside and saying it's truly remarkable how June Steenkamp has reacted to or listened and remained stony-faced as she listened to Oscar Pistorius give details of what he says happened on that morning. But as time went on, we saw other members of the family start crying. They were wiping their faces with tissue. And as we looked towards the other side of the gallery as well, Amy Pistorius, Oscar's sister, was the one who really burst out and started wiping her tears away. At some point, a court had to be adjourned as well. And when that did happen, the family went out into the passage and really started breaking down. So it was really an emotional day for both sides of the family, and the first reaction that we're seeing from the Steenkamp family, not from June Steenkamp herself, who has remained stony-faced all along, but from other members of the Steenkamp family who were seated next to her.
Griselda, now the much anticipated cross-examination will in all probability start today at some point. What do we expect to be the cornerstones or the points of attack, for lack of better words, of Gerinal when he puts Oscar on the spot, as it were?
Well, we've already seen Gerinal in action when he cross-examined the defence's first witness, the pathologist Jan Botha. So we really dug into the testimony of Jan Botha, and we're expecting him to not to spare any punches when he cross-examines Oscar Pistorius on the events that happened that morning. We're expecting him, first of all, to ask Oscar Pistorius why he did not call an ambulance after realizing what he had done, why he did not first call an ambulance, because you will recall what we do know now is that Oscar Pistorius did call the Silverwoods estate manager, Mr. Stander. So really that will take center stage about how come Oscar Pistorius, after realizing that he says it mistakenly shot and killed his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp, the first point would be to call an ambulance to try to save her life. And also Oscar would need to answer, of course, why he went up the flight of stairs after he had taken Reeva Steenkamp's body downstairs. Just some of the critical questions also relating to the fans. We previously heard about one fan that was brought in from the balcony. Yesterday we heard about two fans that Oscar Pistorius had alluded to. So really we were expecting Gerinal to try and punch holes into that statement and look through finer detail exactly what Oscar Pistorius said, and basically try to find ways to get Oscar Pistorius to take the rap for murdering Reeva Steenkamp.
Griselda, thank you very much. Griselda, of course, as always, will keep us updated throughout the day as to what is happening at the Notrth Gauteng High Court. It should be a very interesting day, a much anticipated day, with Oscar expected to go under cross-examination from Gerinal. And if the precedents are anything to go by, it will be very difficult and there'll be lots of emotion involved. Just to recap, yesterday, of course, Oscar Pistorius will continue giving evidence for a third day today in the Notrth Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. The courtroom is likely to again see intense emotion from Pistorius, who could come under tough cross-examination from prosecutor Gerrie Nel. Pistorius stands accused, of course, of murdering his model girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, on Valentine's Day last year. Court proceedings adjourned early for the second time yesterday. Pistorius broke down and cried loudly as he finally gave his own account on how he shot and killed Steenkamp. He alleged to have mistaken her for an intruder. Advocate Barry Roo is expected to conclude leading Pistorius' evidence by lunchtime today. Subsequently, Nel's cross-examination is expected to last for several days because every aspect of the 4 charges the athlete's facing will be scrutinized. Also, honeymoon murder accused Srindavani has spent his first night at the Valkenburg Psychiatric Hospital in Pinelands on the Cape Peninsula. Valkenburg is a large government-funded tertiary psychiatric hospital. He will spend the next month at the hospital undergoing treatment. Yesterday, he appeared briefly in the Western Cape High Court. Davani was formally charged with kidnapping, robbery with aggravating circumstances, murder, and obstructing the course of justice. He's been remanded in custody with the case being postponed until the 12th of May. He did not apply for bail. Davani claims he and his wife were kidnapped at gunpoint as they drove through Gugulethu in a taxi while on honeymoon in November 2010. He was released unharmed and his body was found in an abandoned taxi shuttle the next day with a gunshot wound to her neck. 3 South Africans are serving jail terms for the murder. Top story, violent service delivery protests at Boitumelong Township near Bloemhof in the northwest have escalated. Angry residents torched an SABC vehicle and one belonging to another television crew. Earlier, the ANC leaders who came to address the residents had to be escorted by police after protesters pelted them with stones. Locals are calling for the dissolution of the Lekwa Temani Municipal Council, citing a lack of basic service delivery.
Tensions having boiled over repeatedly in the last week, they want the local municipality dissolved. A government delegation addressed residents, but tempers flared once again, turning Bloemhof into a war zone. Police and government officials under attack. During the confrontation, the media also in the line of fire. An SABC vehicle and one belonging to another television crew were set alight. The protests have also spread to the neighboring town of Christiana, where foreign shop owners were targeted. At least 13 houses around Bloemhof have now been torched. 4 trucks passing on the nearby N12 were also set alight.
You can watch this very channel for the rest of the day, and we'll keep you updated as that and other stories continue to develop. Let's take a quick look at what you're talking about on social media. Ian Bredenkamp says, the sound of Oscar Pistorius sobbing as he describes Riva's lifeless body in the bathroom is chilling, regardless of which version you buy. Hectic, says Ian. Shiraz Bosman says, obviously you would wail like a dog remembering a beautiful lifeless body covered in blood on your lap. Duh, she says. Laura Meaty says, I find Oscar Pistorius' tears self-indulgent. I mean, come on, get a grip already. It can't all be about you. That's a different take. Chelsea Platt says, right now Oscar Pistorius just needs a mother's hug. His family are amazing, the way they're supporting him. His reactions say it all to me. From Chelsea. Gino says, when is Oscar Pistorius going to scream for help? I'm waiting for that scream. Yes, he screams like a girl. That's what came out in the first week of the trial. Of course, we will keep you updated how it breaks, but keep it coming. We love your interactions. We love your pictures. More so, we love your video on this very line at SABC Newsroom on our Twitter page. Of course, you can also go to our Facebook page, where it's always updated with the very latest on all stories around. There you'll find the latest on Oscar Pistorius. Also, after the break, we speak to Professor Nicholas Bigby from the Africa Growth Institute about Nigeria's economic success and what this means for South Africa. Articles on this story is also available on the page. According to the Deputy Water Minister, water leaks are costing the country 7 billion rand a year. Well, more on that is on our page. If you want to get all of that sort of detail, go onto our Facebook page. We got a story, we got some video, we got all of that. Then, on a lighter note, earlier this week we brought you some of this year's biggest live TV news bloopers. Well, we found the latest one on YouTube this morning. Have a look at this. It's in Dutch, but it's still quite humorous.
Een van de 3 prachtige historische Hanzesteden in de IJsseldelta. Want hier wordt binnenkort het grootste paasevenement van Nederland georganiseerd. Seelkampen. Burgemeester, wat is er nou zo bijzonder aan Seelkampen?
Als je de mooiste... Dat gaat niet goed. Deze kant op. Nee. Probeer.
Wow. Difficult job this is, I can tell you. That happened in Holland. And occasionally we'll put some of these videos up and hopefully you enjoy it as much as we do, because sometimes you've got to have a little bit of a giggle for the things that we do in this life. After the break, we speak to Professor Nicholas Bigby about Nigeria now being Africa's biggest economy. Don't go away.
Zoom into Africa. This is Libya. The chairman of the General National Congress is Mr. Nouri Abu Samen. Libya got independent from Italy on 10 February in 1947. The population is more than 6 million people. One of Libya's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit, Libyan dinar.
The Swaziland Tourism Authority invited Kaleidoscope on a media tour of what has become known as the Little Switzerland of Africa, the Kingdom of Swaziland. The Mantanga Waterfall is one of Swaziland's best known and most accessible waterfalls, as it can be seen within 50 meters.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
The household structure has changed drastically. Traditionally, orphans were absorbed by extended members of their family. But today, that safety net is no longer effective and children are left to fend for themselves.
When you look at Section 137 of the Children's Act, it has made provision that these children, after being recognized as child-headed household, need to be placed under an adult supervisor.
Join us again next week as we bring you stories of change makers, hope and courage.
Welcome back. Nigeria has overtaken South Africa as Africa's largest economy after a rebasing of its gross domestic product. Nigeria's GDP for 2013 totaled the equivalent of $510 billion. This is up by about 40% from the last estimate of $292 billion and overtakes South Africa's GDP of $353 billion. Nigeria's recent growth rate of over 6% is also better than South Africa's, which has struggled to get beyond 3.5%. Analysts, however, have stressed that GDP per capita rates are significantly higher here in South Africa. Now, I'm joined from Cape Town by Professor Nicholas Bigby from the African Growth Institute. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben. Thanks for having me.
It's not really a surprise that Nigeria has become Africa's largest economy, is it?
It's not surprising. I was in Lagos only about a week ago. The Nigerians now have the bragging right. You could see the atmosphere there. There is a lot of activities all around the country. And it's something that we suspected for a number of years now. In the mid-2000s, I suspected that Nigeria by then was even bigger than South Africa in terms of GDP. So it's something that we knew was going to come, but we didn't think it was going to come that quickly. But if you remember, the rebasing started quite a while ago, and the last time I was there last year, already we had a feeling that it was going to be big. but I didn't know it was going to be that big.
Now, Professor, Global Competitive Indexes rank South Africa at 53 compared to Nigeria at 120 out of 148 countries. How does it then happen that, how is this possible, really? It doesn't add up. What are they doing?
You see, what happened, the Global Competitive Index is looking at the cost of the easiness at which you can do business in the country. At that level, South Africa is still the most efficient. I mean, in Africa is the most efficient economy. So to start a business here, the legal regulatory issues, and the things that make business run well. So South Africa is leading on that. Nigeria, look, it's more like you can compare that to China or any of the emerging markets. Yeah. In terms of the number of people and the activities, yeah, that's where Nigeria. The population helps quite a lot, and the consumption of the people. If you have 170 million people, then they are more likely to have higher purchasing power. So you get the two extremes, where on the one hand, the cost of doing business is lower here, but the cost of doing business in Nigeria is higher because of the reasons I've just outlined. But also, if you look at the per capita, GDP per capita, that's also higher in this country because of just the management of the economy here is a lot better, and also the wealth here is a bit better distributed evenly compared to Nigeria. So yeah, there's that kind of contradictions, but that's how it works. When you look at the GDP, it's a figure that look at the population as a whole. But when you then start looking at the population and then dividing that the amount of the GDP to the total population, then you get a different picture.
What are the factors holding South Africa's economy back then at the moment? Is it a question of labour unrest and monopolies, and that sort of got us caught in a bit of a perfect storm at the moment?
There are a lot of issues that are holding South Africa back at the moment. When you look at, we haven't really gone into. When you look at Nigeria, and most people don't know, and many other African countries. At the lower level, there is sufficient business. The small businesses in these countries are very more active compared to here, which is dominated by the big organizations. So I think what we need to do here is just to pay a lot of attention to SMEs, and then also the training component. We don't actually train people here to start business. Most people want to work for established institutions. Well, again, when you go to the continent, like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, most people start business, they start their own business. So there is a different culture of actual entrepreneurship that is not in our favor. And I think it's something that the government is paying attention, but not paying attention enough. And that is why we are having this very, very low growth. Government doesn't create jobs. It's always a corporate sector that does. But I think there are still obstacles in that area. The government needs to loosen up a bit to allow businesses to actually drive the economy. And training, as I mentioned, we are not really training entrepreneurs, which is something that we need to do.
Yeah. In the end, this kind of thing, this kind of rating, biggest economy, amounts to very little more than bragging rights. But in your opinion, what should be the lesson that South Africa and South African business takes out of this forward?
I think we mentioned the bragging rights, but sometimes it's even more than that. I mean, if I'm an investor somewhere in Japan or the Middle East or most of these countries in Far East, you look at economies where there are potential. I mean, the big size of the economy always indicate that there are business opportunities. So the issues surrounding, and if you also remember, the GDP per capita for Nigeria has now increased. So it's now saying to investors that, you know what, Nigeria is open for business. Even though the man in the street, the woman in the street doesn't feel it, but the business perception, the confidence that investors will have, they will be moving towards Nigeria more than they used to. So I think the lesson we can take from here is that, look, once you have a positive economic image, then the global community, the business community, investment community will pay attention to you. And once you lose that, there's also a negative side. So we mustn't be lagging. I don't want a situation where in a few years' time Egypt overtakes South Africa. Then it becomes a problem.
Well, we hope that is some time away and that our economic recovery is well underway, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us today. That's from the Africa Growth Institute. Professor Nicholas Bigper joining us live there from Cape Town. Prasa Rail, a division of Prasa, are taking strong action against any commuter found hanging on the outside of metro rail trains, including clinging onto the front of the train even. Metro Rail Security Services has been put on high alert to take strong action against any commuter found riding on the outside of trains. With operations given as safety directives, the trains will no longer leave the platform if people are hanging on the outside. The Prasa Rail CEO has admitted that sets shortages as a result of the age and high prevalence of breakdowns have resulted in some overcrowding. However, these do not justify operating under perilous conditions, he says. We are joined this morning by Nana Zenani from Prasa Rail. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Eben.
It's said a lot there. I'm sure that you're quite prepared.
Absolutely.
Let's start at the beginning with people hanging on the outside of trains in the mornings. That's very dangerous, isn't it?
Well, the number of people that are actually doing that vary quite significantly. You would get, in fact, in terms of age, you get the breadwinners who are the pillars of their society, pillars of their family, who actually justify hanging on the side of the train because of the fact that the trains are delayed or the trains have broken down and they're late. And you get the young ones who do it because they think that it is a cool thing to do. Now, a train is an immovable object. You can't pull a handbrake, you can't swerve, you can't stop it immediately. And as soon as we have an injury or fatality across the line, we have to stop operations and make sure that all the investigative procedures are done.
Yeah.
That slows down the process of moving people even more significantly. So we're not tolerating this anymore. We just don't want it as a culture, regardless of what seemingly justifiable reasons there may be.
Now, just put us in the picture as to the numbers of people losing their lives. We've seen one recently where 2 people died again. The numbers that we are looking at with people losing their lives, how serious the problem is, and then maybe how you guys are going to police it.
Look, we've had in the past financial year, 2012 and 13, we've had 238 people. Out of that number, 221 were actually people who were struck by trains while walking across our lines, but not necessarily interacting or being in the train. 17 of those were people who literally fell off while they were hanging or clinging onto the trains. Now, it sets us back in terms of just running the trains efficiently in the morning, in terms of making sure that when we introduce our new service and our modernized service, that there is a culture of safety. Because regardless of whether the trains are available or not, the issue of safe traveling is a personal responsibility. And this is what we want to facilitate, and this is what we want to see on our system.
You talk about upgrading the network, as it were. Where are we in this process, and when do we see new trains or newer trains on our rails?
We've got 2 processes currently running, and you must understand that even though we're upgrading and modernizing, we are still running operations and we still are experiencing all sorts of challenges, which we've obviously admitted to. The first process is that we are modernizing our stations, we're modernizing our power lines, our signaling, etc. All of the aspects that are important in terms of safety, in terms of managing the system and making sure that it's operational. We also have what we've introduced as operational efficiencies, and those would be in areas where we run in the excess of about 100,000 people, where we run express trains, so the train won't stop at each and every station to try and minimize the issue of overcrowding. So those are some of the interventions that are happening in the current. Long term, what we are doing is modernizing to make sure that when the new system or the new trains arrive, that the old and the new are able to interface. We're able to run the trains that we currently have, which, of course, we're refurbishing as well, to make sure that they last within the 20-year cycle. But even among those, we have to select the ones that are fixable.
I saw a number that you were going to put 15 new trains on the lines by about the end of February. Has that happened?
Well, let's perhaps reconfigure that a little bit. We're expecting to receive our batch of new trains anytime between 2015 and 16. Reason being, of course, we need to be able to prepare the system so that it can accept depots to be available so that we can accept the new trains. We're getting in the excess of about 300 trains per annum, but those will be evenly distributed. So you're not going to get Gauteng getting the bulk of the trains, but rather we're looking at what we call corridors. corridors are actually rail lines where we run, as I said, in one area we can run in excess of 100,000 people at peak. Those are the areas that we are prioritizing in terms of modernization, in terms of efficiencies in our operations that we're introducing. And of course, those will be the priority areas nationally that would receive the new trains. It's incremental. So on a year-on-year basis, over the next 20 years, we'll be receiving trains. But I think what's important is the fact that the manufacturing of trains and the job creation is actually localized. So the first batch we will receive from our manufacturers overseas, but the factory, the skilling, and the maintenance going forward will happen here. So we're looking at around 65,000 jobs over the next 20 years.
That's real sustainability and makes sense. Tell us a little bit more about express trains and things like shuttle trains and how these kind of things will fit into the existing network.
Now, if you're a commuter and you're standing, perhaps observing this, it might not sit well with you. But the whole idea is that if there are 2 or 3 or even 4 stations that are furthest from the changeover station, which we'll call Johannesburg Park Station, for lack of a better word, those are the trains which we will deploy. Those are the stations in which we will deploy empty trains. So 2 or 3 sets at a time to clear those passengers, to take them straight to Johannesburg Park Station rather than stopping. And on the shorter routes or closest to the main station, we then run a train that will go up and down, picking up those passengers. It's a system that we used to use previously, but because of the swelling in the number of people that live in and around the area and the demand for transportation, we've had to reintroduce.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Nana Zanani from Prasa. Interesting that people would be surfing trains. Is that almost like a sport for the youngsters, I would think?
It's a very unfortunate sport because if you're dealing with 1,000 tons of steel and you are a human being, you will not win.
Yeah, it's not like crashing off a surfboard into the ocean, is it?
In fact, you shouldn't even be calling it train surfing because you absolutely have no control over what will happen to you.
Well, thank you once again for joining us this morning. Nana Zanani from Prasa, giving us a little head start as to how your commute is going to be a little bit easier going forward. Let's take a quick look. Of course, court is not in session yet. We're still waiting. So in the meantime, let's take a look at what you are passionate about on social media this morning. Precious M says, so Nigeria becomes Africa's biggest economy. Time for some introspection, South Africa. Very sober there. Chris Catherine Bones says, on Sunday, Nigeria took the crown away from South Africa and became the biggest economy in Africa. Hey, Nollywood, he says. Professor Jeffrey Rugege says, Nigeria becomes #1 economy in Africa. Governance improves, everything falls into place. It was a question of time. Diamonds are not everything. Don't tell that to the ladies. Mazandi says, Nigeria takes over South Africa as the African economy with the biggest economy. It will hardly be noticeable because Niger too overpopulated. Well, I can tell you that court is about underway as we speak. It will be a very interesting day today. Oscar Pistorius will be cross-examined by Gerunal at some point after his attorney, or his advocate in this case, Barry Roo, finishes with his defense lead today. Let's go straight to the courthouse, the Notrth Gauteng High Court, that is, for day 19 of the Oscar Pistorius trial.
And if it's possible to speak up, Mr. Pistorius, and maybe lean a bit forward.
My lady, after I entered the toilet, I knelt down over Reva. She was sitting with her weight on top of the toilet bowl. I checked to see if she was breathing, and she wasn't, and I put my arms underneath her shoulders and I pulled her weight onto me, and I sat there crying for some time. I had her head on my left shoulder, and I could feel the blood was running down on me. At a point, I heard her breathing. So I immediately put her weight on top of me and I swiveled around. I sat back with my bum against the floor and my back up against the wall where the door is, on the left-hand side of the door, and I pulled her weight on me and I turned around so that I could get her to the door of the toilet so that I could pick her up. I could see that her arm was broken. I placed her in the I couldn't pick her up, but I kind of was on my knees and on one of my feet, and I was pulling her into the bathroom. I placed her down, I pulled one of the bathroom carpets closer, and I placed her head down softly on the carpet. I saw that her cell phone was in the toilet, so I grabbed her cell phone and I tried to phone off it, but it had a passcode on it that I couldn't access. I ran back to my bedroom where my phone was, next to the left-hand side of the bed. And both my phones were there. I picked them up and I ran back to Riva. I then phoned Mr. Stander, Johan Stander, who was a gentleman who lived in the estate, somebody that I'd become a friend with. I phoned him to ask him for help, to help me come and help. I couldn't pick Riva up. I was struggling to pick her up.
We know from the records, Mr. Pistorius, that call was 3:19:03.
That's correct, my lady.
That's the record ZZ8.
Did you say ZZ8?
ZZ8, my lady.
8.
Double Z8.
Thank you.
I was trying to pick Riva up, but I couldn't pick her up. I was scared that I hurt her more, so I pulled her arm over onto her body, and I was trying to pick her up.
If I may just stop you there, Mr. Pistorius. I see from the records at 3:20:05 you phoned 911. When?
That's correct, my lady.
Could you tell the court about that?
I was trying to pick Riva up, and I didn't really know what to do. I could see that she was breathing. She's struggling to breathe. I phoned 911 or 08 Netken. I don't recall speaking to the operator, but I remember him telling me that I needed to get Reva to the hospital, that I mustn't wait for him.
I also see from the records at 3:21:33 you phoned security. A call lasting 9 seconds.
That's correct, my lady. I don't remember phoning the security though, but from the phone records I see that there was a call made from my cell phone to the security. I think it was after I got off the phone with the Netcare 911 call centre, I ran downstairs to open the front door. I could barely pick Reva up. I wouldn't have been able to open the doors and carry her, so I opened my bedroom door, and I opened the front door. I then ran back up to my room, and on the way into my room I tried to force the door open. There's two doors to my bedroom, my lady. The one I use just locks with the key, and then the other one's got a latch at the top and at the bottom. So I ran into the door, and it didn't break open, and I unlatched the bottom latch, and when I unlatched the bottom latch, the door opened. The house, all the doors at the bottom of the house and most of the doors at the top are double doors. If one door is open, you can walk through it, but I got the doors made so that the house is wheelchair friendly, so if you want to have a wider passage, you have to open both the doors. I then went back to the bathroom, and I picked Reva up. I don't recall carrying her some of the way, but I remember getting to the second flight of stairs, and Mr. Stander and his daughter, Miss Stander, arrived. At that point, I was shouting and screaming for him to help me get her to the hospital. When I got down to the bottom of the flight of stairs, either Mr. Stander or Chris Stander told me to put Reva down. They said that the ambulance was on its way. Before I put her down, I said to them that we need to get to the hospital. We need to get to the hospital. And they said just put her down. The ambulance is on its way. And then I just sat there with her and I waited for the ambulance to arrive, and I felt helpless. I wanted to take her to the hospital. I had my fingers in her mouth to help her try breathe. I had my hand on her hip. I was trying to stop the bleeding.
Who was with you at that time?
Mr. Stander and Miss Stander were at my house at that time, my lady.
Could you explain the presence of plastic bags at the scene?
I was trying to hold Reva's hip with my hand to put pressure on it so that it didn't stop bleeding as much. Miss Stander asked me if I had any tape or any rope or anything like that, so that she could tie Reva's tie her arm so that it wouldn't bleed as much. I don't remember if I went to collect there's a cabinet in my pantry that's got all the type of utility things one would use in a house, like tape and bags and things. So I don't know if I went and fetched them or if Miss Stander went and fetched them.
Did you do anything with the bags?
I don't remember, my lady.
Did the paramedics arrive at the scene? Or first Dr. Stipp? Which one?
There was a person that arrived at the house. Carice came in and she said to me that there's a doctor, and I immediately felt relieved. I looked up and I saw a person walk into my house who was later... I later found out it was Dr. Stipp. I still don't remember his face or what he looked like, but he came in the house, and I remember me crying for him to help me, for him to help Reva. He didn't seem like he knew what he was doing. He didn't seem like he seemed overwhelmed by the situation. Everything he told me to do, I was already doing. I was already trying to stop the bleeding. I was already trying to help Reva breathe. He kneeled down on her right-hand side for a couple of minutes, I think, and then I don't remember seeing him again. He walked outside, and he was outside. I was shouting for him to come back in the house and help me. But the paramedics then arrived. They asked for some space to work, so I stood up.
Did you remain there or did you go somewhere else? Can you remember going to the kitchen?
Reva had already died whilst I was holding her before the ambulance arrived, so I knew that there was nothing that they could do for her.
Did you at some stage go to the kitchen?
I stood back when they arrived, and I stood a couple of meters away from them to open plan home. So I stood at the couple of meters away where the dining room and the kitchen kind of meet. And then the lady paramedic came to me, and she said to me that she'd like to inform me that Reva has passed. The paramedic asked me for identification, if there was some form of ID. So I went and I got Reva's handbag in my bedroom. I didn't go through her handbag. I just simply picked up her, walked into the room and got her handbag and brought it out. Miss Stander was waiting there and on the first floor outside my room, and I gave the handbag to her.
Could you move a little bit forward, if you don't mind, Mr. Pistorius?
I then went with Miss Stander downstairs to where the paramedics were. I sat in the kitchen on the floor crying. There's an island in the kitchen serving counter, and I sat there. And then I don't know how much time passed, but at that point some police officers arrived shortly thereafter.
Do you know it was?
It was. There were two officers. They weren't dressed in police clothing. They were dressed in civilian clothing. I think the one officer had shorts on, and the other one, they were just both casually dressed. And then it was Colonel van Rensburg who arrived at, I think, more or less the same time. He came up to me and he introduced himself. I was, at that point, unable to speak with him. I was just sitting on the floor crying. some time had passed, and a police officer asked me to just stay in the kitchen. I saw the one police officer was standing nearby at the bottom of the stairs. Another police officer asked me if there was anybody else in the house, and I just motioned to him that there wasn't. He proceeded to check the bottom of the home. He then went upstairs, and then he came downstairs. I didn't have my head up much, and I wasn't in sight of the staircase, but at times I couldn't sit, at times I stood up, and every time I looked up there were more people in the house, there were more policemen. There were people going up and down the stairs. I was standing in the kitchen against the where the far side of the kitchen is away from the dining room, where there's a prep bowl, a small zinc, and I asked a policeman if I may wash my hands because the smell of the blood was making me throw up. And he said he'd ask. And Mr. van Rensburg, or Colonel van Rensburg, came back to me and he said to me I may wash my hands. I don't remember washing my chest, I just remember washing my hands and washing my face. At that point I was still standing in the kitchen, and I saw Mr. Hilton Botha arrive. He came in straight from the front door up to me. He asked me if I remember him. He immediately went from where I was, he went upstairs. He came downstairs some time later. At the time I was in the kitchen, I couldn't look around the corner because every time I saw Reva, I got sick. So I stayed more inside the kitchen. At a time I went and I sat in the pantry against the washing machine.